You're listening to a Least Important Things miniseries. Dear listener, your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to rewatch every Mission Impossible movie with Luke Ferris and Mike Wynne. Together, you'll investigate everything from Tom Cruise's running stride to the legacy of this spy action franchise. Good luck. This podcast will self-destruct in 30 seconds. Welcome to Podcast Impossible, a special rewatch miniseries from Least Important Things where we accept the mission of watching every Mission Impossible movie leading up to the 7th installment in the series. Our task is to investigate the improbable influence of this franchise on culture, cinema, and Tom Cruise's legacy. With me, of course, is my Luther to my Ethan, my good friend Mike Wynne. And listeners, if you're feeling like it's a little different to today's episode, I would say it's gone rogue. We're in person, Mike. Are we not?
We are in person. It's because we are we're rogue. We
went rogue.
We have no network.
We have no
supporting.
We have no support.
Overhead Skynet ish. We don't have the IMF.
We're totally rogue. So we're bunkered up in a safe house, deciding what to do next. But I think we're gonna bring in our Ilsa to our Luther to our Ethan. It is a good friend of the pod. This has been building maybe 2 years. He was a avid listener of Jurassic Pod.
Yeah. He got into Jurassic Park because of our podcast, our work on Jurassic Pod.
This has been a long time coming. Andy Warsen, welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you.
I'm really excited to be here. I wouldn't normally say this, but vacation's awesome. Coming on a podcast to talk with your friends about Mission Impossible, also really awesome.
Again, Andy, we appreciate the dedication.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, this technically is your first live appearance on this podcast, but it is not your first appearance on this podcast. Do you remember what your first appearance was?
Yes. So I didn't realize that was the intention of my first ever appearance.
Wait, so are you saying you were being recorded?
Listeners,
were you being recorded against your will or unknown?
I wasn't saying against my will. I just thought he was recording it for you to hear, like literally just
as
for
notes,
Luke
as
to
like
hear.
Historical posterity.
So we're all clear. Let's just get everything out in the open. Okay. That was the intent. Luke decided to break the third wall and make it content. Luke is a serial creator. He's a content guy.
Always be recording.
In his life, it's only moments that are and are not content.
Yeah, everything is content. To be fair, I can neither confirm nor deny my involvement in making that part of the episode. But we're glad to have you live here, taking time out of your vacation to spend time with us and talk Mission Impossible Rouge Nation. Now, Andy, before we get into the film, we always like to ask our guests, what's your journey with Mission Impossible? What is your experience, your past, your walk with Mission Impossible?
Or a run if you're a Tom Cruise.
Perfect.
But I am really excited to be joining the show. So grateful to be on. And I think I'm going to bring a different spin to this podcast because I have zero history with this franchise.
Zero.
Unlike past guests, great guests of Daniel and Jim, I have never watched these movies before my good friend and colleague Mike Wynne has said, hey, we're going to do another rewatch podcast, and it's on Mission Impossible. So I've been thinking a lot about why I never really watched these movies, which is weird because I like movies in general. I like action movies. I like spy movies. And I like franchises in general. So if I think back, I was a little young probably for the early movies for sure, similar to a Jurassic Park phenomenon. But I just thought they were super cheesy as I got older. And I just thought, oh, no, there's not really any plot line or storyline to it. No character development, that type of deal. I thought they were just straight action movies, which is not the case. So I'm really excited to be talking about MI5, or as my wife said to call it, Miss. So
I like that even better. Just Miss.
Just Miss.
It's really interesting you bring up the franchise aspect because I think that happens to a lot of people where you look at big budget franchises and either you weren't on the franchise bandwagon early and you just assume it's kind of the same old thing. And I think I've had a relationship with Mission Impossible in the same way, where I've had moments where I've been into it. Like I was kind of the inverse. I saw the original, the first 2 and 3 movies, and I loved them, but I didn't really realize what was happening with these newer movies until I kind of got on the bandwagon, because I think I only saw 1 or 2 of them in theaters, and then realizing, oh, they're not just run of the mill action movies. There's something a little bit deeper here. So, but it's fun. I'm glad we have a fresh perspective on the show today, because I think it helps bring anybody and everybody that's listening.
I love that you said I'm going to be a fresh insight, but maybe not a smart or insightful.
It's going to be certainly fresh. That's for sure.
Somehow this is better.
It is better. If you can hear that, folks, that is Cassius, Mike's golden retriever. Andy also has a golden retriever. So this is a golden retriever friendly podcast. Before we get into Rogue Nation, I wanted to share some background for you guys and to help spur a conversation. Are you guys ready?
I'm so ready.
I'm going to take a big breath. Here we go. Mission Impossible Rogue Nation opened on July 31st, 2015. So we're back to a summer release after Christmas release in the 4th one. That weekend, gentlemen, you could have seen movies like Pixels, Sharknado 3, Terminator Genesis, and Minions, my least favorite cinema franchise. It would gross over $682 million, which is $2 million short of Ghost Protocol. So pretty impressive, like that they're consistently hitting those levels. It cost $150 million to make and was shot on location in Morocco, Vienna, Malaysia, and London. And here's the team. It was directed by Chris McQuarrie, who was first a writer on The Usual Suspects, if you've ever seen that great kind of, I would call that more of an indie crime thriller. And then Valkyrie, which is the first time he met Tom Cruise. And they also worked together on Jack Reacher, which he directed. And then he also wrote on Edge of Tomorrow, which is also known as
Live, Die, Repeat,
as a writer. And it was there when the two offset actually started talking about this film, and Tom kind of invited him to direct it. So I'm going to talk about Chris more because I have a lot to say about him that I think is really important to the franchise. Robert Elswit returns for cinematography from the last film. This was edited by Eddie Hamilton, who previously edited Kick-Ass 1 and 2, X-Men First Class, and The Kingsman, so spy franchise editor. And he's going to be part of this team as we move forward. Again, this is starting into a new era of the franchise with Chris McQuarrie, or McQ, as Tom calls him, which I think is really interesting. So I'm going to call him McQ. But it's basically that new iteration of this team. The music was not done by Michael Giannaccio. He left for... Take a guess that Michael Giannaccio left for a different project and couldn't do this project.
Of course, everybody knows this. It's Curb Your Enthusiasm.
No,
dang it! I'm so sorry.
Jurassic World.
I thought it was going to be Alias.
No, retroactively Alias. But he left to do Jurassic World. So Joe Kramer comes in. He did Jack Reacher, so he knew McHugh. Written by McQuarrie as well, who's a writer, and Drew Pierce, who wrote on Iron Man 3. And he would go on to do Hobbs and Shaw.
Listener, Luke, you're doing a great job. Listener, I just want you to understand this podcast. Okay, is this like on Amazon? If you watch the movies and then it has the little box. Let me pull back the curtain a little bit on this. Okay, so I'm here. I'm just hanging out. I'm talking about Mission Impossible. Andy's here talking about Mission Impossible. Luke is the only one preparing for this podcast outside of us watching the movies. Luke has written a dissertation on Mission Impossible. So, if you enjoy this podcast, it's really just because of Luke.
Oh, Mike, I appreciate that. I would accept that compliment, but it actually is it is a joy to do this. And I have such a boring life that researching Mission Impossible is just pure pleasure. It is a hobby for me. So as much as I do it for you guys, I do it for myself as well. The film stars a little man named Tom Cruise, of course, as Ethan Hunt. Jeremy Renner returns for William Brandt. Fun fact, he still has one more film on his contract, but I don't know if he's going to be in the new movies. Interesting thing to think about. Maybe he'll come back for part 2.
Well, no spoilers. He might be in the next one.
The trailer did come out today, but we're not going to talk about it in honor of Mike's trailer avoidance.
Yeah, trailer.
Did you watch it, Andy?
No, I was going to say I thought Mike was referring to the fact that I have yet to see MI6. And
okay.
I was assuming that he'd be in MI6.
Spoiler alert, my friend.
Fresh take.
I'm sorry. Simon Pegg is back as Benji, of course. Rebecca Ferguson joins the team as Ilsa Faust. Ving Rhames returns as Luther. Sean Harris as Lane. Simon McBurney as Adelaide. Tom Hollander, not Tom Holland, to be confused with, as the Prime Minister. And Alec Baldwin as Alan Hunley. Some interesting facts that you can fact check. I'm not going to do the work for you. So a big part of this film, of course, is the opener, the cold open stunt, where Tom Cruise is hanging off the airplane. If you haven't seen the movie and are just listening to the podcast, at times he was suspended in the aircraft up to 5,000 feet. So if you're watching that, he's actually on the airplane. If you didn't know that, like, he is in the air. It is insane. A major obstacle to filming was obviously he's on an airplane as it's taking off. But some engineering minds on my panel today would enjoy this. What do you think is one of the more dangerous things of doing that?
The landing.
Letting go?
Yes, both of the things. But the two big things that they were concerned about was bird strikes.
Oh, yeah.
So birds hitting Tom Cruise at a high velocity, which Tom knew about because he is a pilot. And 2 was actually making sure the runway was clean, because any kind of debris or dirt that was kicked up at a high rate, high velocity,
dead,
would be like a bullet.
Dead reckoning.
Dead reckoning. Yeah. So that was also the other concern. And then, of course, if you've ever been maybe on a boat or something like that, and you try to like open your eyes, or maybe I don't know, do people like open their eyes, or like, do they have goggles when they're go-karting? I'm not a go-kart guy.
Sure.
You know when your like eyes get watery?
Yeah, like race car drivers.
I do know
masks.
the feeling.
Yeah.
You know that feeling? Imagine if you were on a plane as it's taking off, you would have more than watery eyes. So they had to have special contacts.
I saw a dog in a car the other day with a set of goggles. This family had given their dog a set of goggles so that he could.
They were
hang out the
concerned.
window.
This is the same thing. So they had to give Cruise special lenses when he was going up
genius.
there. It's pretty cool, obviously, but he couldn't really see with the lenses. Like the lenses.
I was talking about the dog goggles.
Oh,
not the contacts.
They did 8 takes of that, and when I mean 8 takes, they flew the plane off the ground, landed it again 8 times.
Oh, I thought that was a one take kind of thing.
No.
Did they talk about why they did 8 takes?
They thought, they were like, he might die. Now, again, when you're watching,
he might die. Let's do this 8 times.
Retroactively, they're like, they're building the hype as, he's about like this. We have no idea if this is going to work. They did it, and you can watch the behind the scenes, and basically the crew and team members working on it were like, wow, we did it. They assumed that he was going to be done, but Tom Cruise like immediately said, go again. And they did it 8 times.
Yeah, it's because he's an adrenaline junkie. He got the shot. He knows he got the shot.
He said that once he did it the first time, he was fine. And then he wanted to make sure the performance was up to snuff. Once he knew that he could do it physically, he wanted to make sure that.
I think it was actually more practical than that. I think it took them 15 minutes to get the shot. And then they thought, you know what? We kind of have this plane for a couple hours.
Yeah.
We need to do something
You need to do something with it. This is the first Mission Impossible film where every member of the team, the IMF team, is a veteran of the previous film, which is, I think, interesting. That's a good one to think about.
To get here, but got here. Started from the bottom.
Ethan receives a new mission on vinyl, which is a nod to the original television show.
Yeah. Also,
we'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that later
because
I have to talk about it. The Syndicate is also from the original television show, which is interesting. And then when they were training for the underwater scene, how long do you think he was able to hold his breath, Tom Cruise?
I looked this one up. I know the answer.
Do you have it? I wonder if we have the same.
I have a lot of comments about this scene in general. So
okay, we'll talk about it. That's the thing about all my facts. I feel like it's just teasers.
These are movie notes.
It's just
actually
teasers.
What they are.
Tom Cruise is only 5 years younger in this film than Jon Voight was in the original Mission Impossible.
Unbelievable.
Tom Cruise, whatever he's doing, he's taking care of himself. Before we dive in for the beat by beat, I wanted to talk a little bit about the director, Chris McQuarrie. He's a very interesting character because him and Tom seem to be really close friends. They seem to work together well. They seem to be a yin and yang director-actor duo. But when you hear Chris talk about Tom, he obviously admires him, but also knows what he's looking for. And it's an interesting dynamic when you have somebody so involved as Tom Cruise, where he's not just the actor, he's not just the star, he's the producer. We don't know. I'm not on set, but he's probably a micromanager. As a director, I think it's really interesting to have those characteristics. But if you look at McQuarrie, and they've talked about this, the way they've made their movies and the way they shot Jack Reacher was to think about multiple set pieces, action set pieces, and then build the film out from there. So it's less script oriented and more act sequence oriented, and then they build the film and the story around the action sequences. It's a really interesting way to do a movie, but it's obviously worked out really well, and they've been able to create emotional sequences within that framework. If you want to learn more about McQuarrie, I actually wrote a piece. It's up now on leastimportantthings.com about the secret formula behind Mission Impossible's success, specifically talking about the original film and tying it to what's happening now with the Chris McQuarrie trilogy, I guess is what it's going to be.
You wrote a piece about that?
I did. Like you kind of teased me up. I do have too much time on my hands. So you can find that now on leastimportantthings.com. It is very lit. All right, gentlemen, any thoughts overall on the film before I dive into the beat by beat and take a sip of water?
Our Tom Cruise running timeline check-in. Tom Cruise runs for an on-screen time of 1 minute and 38 seconds.
1 minute and 38 seconds.
And I don't even ask how that compares to other movies, okay? Because I did not look.
It doesn't sound very long.
I think that's definitely on the lower end of the scale, if my memory serves me right. In thinking about the movie, there isn't as much running.
The only thing I was going to say, Luke, is you mentioned that Tom Cruise is 5 years, I think you said, younger than Jon Voight was during the first MI movie, which this was released in 2015. This was probably filmed in 2013, 2014, which means that he is now older than Jon Voight is for the current movies that are going to be coming out, which is bananas.
It is.
If you think back to that first movie.
It is. It's probably it goes to his health, his I guess his dedication to health and fitness. And also, if you grew up in the 70s and you were an actor, I think you're using some recreational products that probably aged you faster. And smoking.
Well, it's not that Tom Cruise doesn't use recreational products. It's just that, like you said, there's a difference between the ones that age you faster and age you slower. And Tom Cruise is definitely using the age you slower ones.
Hey, whatever works to bring us here. All right, gentlemen, should we dive into Rouge Nation?
Yeah, I have my notes up, ready to go here. And the only comment I'll make is I watch these movies with my wife. I think I've said that before, but I sat down to watch this one for the first time, and I pulled open my notepad, and she just goes, "Nerd."
Well, you know what?
Really?
Look at my notepad. I have a legal pad.
Oh, it's perfect. So my wife and I have been watching this, and her shtick throughout the series is there's usually one thing from each movie that makes her look up from her Kindle and go, "Oh!" and like point and make a comment about something that's...
Can we call this the Brie paradox? What do we want to call it?
The Brie paradox.
The Brie, I think it's the Brie paradox. I think it deserves that kind of a name.
I like that.
That power.
So there's a couple, and I've texted and messaged you guys these a couple times. So take you back to MI1, the helicopter through the tunnel. I mean, as a first time watcher,
It's
that
a
was
lot.
the one thing. It's a lot. And so that was number one. MI2.
Of the whole movie?
No. Yeah. Well, there's only one scene in each movie. And in MI2, it was the catching the scarf with the wraparound to pull in for the kiss.
Oh, yes. Oh, wow.
She was like, yeah, a little cringy right there.
Actually, I'm surprised it wasn't just the whole movie. Keep going.
MI3, the scene where the rabbit's foot is rolling through the streets of Shanghai, she points up from her Kindle and goes, Chef Boyardee commercial.
That's awesome.
And in reference, obviously,
is so good. That is so good.
That's amazing.
So that was a good one. And MI4, it was the fact that Ethan is a liability trying to catch up to a 50 or 60-year-old dude running with a briefcase.
Yes.
He's the best spy in the world, and he can't catch up to this guy.
Yeah. But then in the next movie, he clearly was in shape enough to.
He got back into shape. Yeah. It wasn't a problem for him that next movie.
And then this movie was Right Away, and it wasn't the airplane stunt, Luke. It was the entrance into the plane. Should have concussed him, taken him out, knocked him out. He battered around like a pinball in a pinball machine, getting into that cockpit or into that craft. And she was like, "Wait, that's it?
That's it?
Like,
he's fine.
He's fine. He's walking away from that. Like,
yeah.
So that was the Brie moment in MI5.
The Brie paradox, amazing. I'm excited to see what the rest of them are. Listeners, we'll
check
update it. There'll be a new segment to have the Brie paradox, the moment where she looks up from her Kindle and says, "Wow, we're doing this as a film."
Love it.
Excellent description.
Talking about spouses and watching these films. I don't know if you've been here when you're with a partner or a spouse and you're trying to get them to watch a movie and they have an opportunity to do something different. And you're right on the edge of they might watch, they might not watch. You turn it on and they get enticed. So my beautiful bride, Audrey, was enticed because the opening is fantastic. I mean, right away, we get a mission. I love a cold open that just dives in right away. We have Benji in the field. He's got the ghillie suit on. We have Brant back at mission headquarters, kind of running the show, and the tension's building. And then we see Ethan just start running after the plane. And my wife was like, she's like, And I was like, Dad, you should watch this. I was like, if you're going to watch anything, this is one of the best scenes to watch because once he gets on the plane, she just was like, wow, this is amazing. She watched the whole sequence. And then as soon as Alec Baldwin got on screen, she's like, Tom Cruise and Alec Baldwin in the movie, I'm out, and walked away. So that's as far as she got. She couldn't do it.
Well, it's impressive. That's like 5 minutes.
So she got 5 minutes in. Gentlemen, Luther is back right away. Within that cold open sequence, we see Luther, who is on a different mission, helping Benji out, which I think is immediately we're getting a fun joke right away, which I appreciate. Tom Cruise running in the suit. How did you guys feel about that? I thought he looked great. It's actually a nod to North by Northwest, which I've read as a fact.
To be fair, he always looks pretty good.
He looked really. I just really like the suit. I think that's just. It would have been cool if he was in action, like get up, like tactical gear. But I thought it was classy that he was in a suit.
Yeah,
I don't have any comment.
Mike,
and he just looked great.
The one part that I thought was funny, and I don't really get the inside joke. I don't think yet between Benji and Luther, but I think Luther was asking Benji, do you want my help? And Benji was refusing to acknowledge that he needed help and actually said, I could use your assistance.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, is there a difference between assistance and help?
Help versus assistance. Help.
No, and I think that's the joke.
No, I disagree. So I think help.
So it wasn't funny to you that he said that?
I think it was very funny, but it's an interesting word choice. Now, this brings up another thing. This could be a long episode. So I've heard feedback that our episode where we talked about the hallway nod was very applicable to people who work in corporations. You both work at a corporation. That's probably 95% of our listenership. I think there's a corporate analogy here when we talk about assistance versus help. Assistance is a very professional term. Like, I'm going to get assistance from a colleague. Help shows desperation. So I think that's where Benji was saying, I needed assistance versus help. Because help is like, okay, I have no idea what I'm doing. Assistance just sounds, oh no, we're just working on it together. We're collaborating.
I don't know. I work in an office. You don't. And
not anymore.
I actually sit directly next to Andy in our office. And oftentimes I will say things like, hey, I'm wondering if you can help me with something.
Yeah, but if you went up to, okay, you know Andy, but like if it was the first time, would you go, can you assist me with this?
No.
I guess I'm
to be fair, I do. You know what, Luke? I'll say this because my first job as a child, I was like 14 or 15, was working for my next door neighbor who held a bunch of rental properties, and he would always email me lists of activities and jobs and things that he wanted done at certain respective locations, and he never used the word help. He only said, can I get your assistance with this?
Oh, so
That's all he would ever
so it
say.
might be email etiquette. The assistants might be more email.
No.
And do you think Benji emailed their assistants?
No
I need
way.
your assistance.
I think we've talked about this too much now. We need to move on. Do you guys know that and my wife called this one out, that the scientists in the plane that Tom Cruise gives his nice little head nod to, do you know where he's from?
Stranger Things. And I was looking at my notes and I was like, why did I say Stranger Thing Russian?
Yes.
Yes. Is that season 3? He's the Russian in season 3, or I can't remember which season it is.
I think it's season 3, but she called it out right away. I was like, that was pretty impressive.
I know that's a good shout out. I think it's interesting with those kind of actors that are like play just the Russian or
they get their start.
Yeah, they get their start. It's really cool to see that throughout the series. This movie, one thing I want to talk about throughout this movie, this feels like the most James Bond-esque Mission Impossible. And we'll get to it later, but that's just something I want to look out for as we're having this discussion. All right, we cut to the record store, which is one of my favorite scenes because I think that record store is probably like where I would die and go to heaven. I mean, it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And you had a beautiful British woman helping him along. I was like, that's like the coolest place in the world. And they have like the mahogany wooden listening room. I was just like, I could just watch Tom Cruise walking around looking at records for about an hour.
The first time watching through, I didn't see it. And then I watched it again. And I didn't realize that Lane is actually in the background of one of the rooms when Tom Cruise walks into the store.
Oh, really?
So I don't know if I saw it the second time. I was like, wait a second, that's him. He's just sitting in this glass room, like reading a book or something.
Oh, that's a good look out for. I did not notice that.
Yep.
So creepy. So creepy. And just, I think it's just a really fun way to open the movie, especially because we're like, okay, this group is not to be trifled with. They obviously have knowledge of how the IMF works. They have knowledge about how spies work. And I like this movie a lot because Ethan's one step behind the whole time. And that tension goes throughout until the very end, not to spoil it.
The only other thing I was going to say is this movie is all about spoilers.
That's true.
Because this scene is just a call forward to the last scene. I mean, it is.
Oh, yeah, it is. I didn't even realize that.
It's the last. It's the exact, and there are a lot more, and I wrote them all down because it kind of started to annoy me.
After watching it through 3 times in like a week, you're like, okay,
you don't get on the first try.
Yeah,
you don't get out of the first try, but yeah, it was a good Easter egg.
So interestingly enough, I don't know if this is worth tracking. Technically, this is 1 year after the 4th film, within the timeline of the movie. Because he's been pursuing this group for a year. He's been trying to track them for a year.
Got it.
So technically, if this movie was released in 2015, but technically it's set in 2012. But that's only if every movie comes out the year that it's made within the timeline of Mission Impossible. So
I don't know, the mid-teens of the 2000s, those kind of
all kind of blur together. You're right. It really doesn't matter, but it's just interesting that it could play a factor as we move forward. Okay, so then we go back to the IMF headquarters. Or no, we go back to the CIA, right?
Yeah, this is a hilariously fun banter between Brant and Hundley when they're in the courtroom. I loved it.
I love me some good Senate hearing spy stuff. It's what I could watch that stuff all day long. There's some really good sequences like that in, I think, the third Bourne movie. I think Bourne Ultimatum.
Bourne movie, yep.
It's a very, I think it's for all the Bourne movies they have it. But I loved it here. We actually have references to the other films, which I think is cool. And McQuarrie is talked about as intentionally wanting to bring all the films of the franchise and kind of layer them. But here it's actually referenced within the movie, which I appreciate. Like, hey, remember when this happened in the last movie when the Kremlin was destroyed after Ethan Hunt came in? I think it's kind of crazy. It's a really good nod. I think Alec Baldwin character, within that scene, he talks about moving on from an era without transparency. And I think he's referencing the Bush administration at that point, because that's during the Patriot Act, when the government had a little bit more power with espionage without oversight. So I think it's just interesting to have kind of that in timeline nod, to use that as an excuse. Also interesting is Alec Baldwin has been in spy films before. He played Jack Ryan, most famously. So it's just fun to see him in this role. I know Alec Baldwin in the news right now over the last year. Well, no matter how you feel about the guy, I really like his performances. And I think him in this character, it brings that gravitas, but also that sinister, it's like the sinister mindset. Like, you don't know.
First time through, I thought he was a bad guy.
Yeah, you don't really know what to trust him, which is always great in a mission movie when you really don't know who to trust.
Why does he just look like a Hundley?
Hundley's a perfect name. I don't know why. It's just a perfect.
Like if you had shown
name.
me just a picture of him and I didn't know who he was, I'd be like, that guy's last name is Hundley.
And it's not Huntley. It's Hundley. There's no T. He would fit as a Hundley.
Yeah,
Hundley.
It's like, it's almost like Ethan Hunt, Hundley. We're really getting deep into Senate hearings. We love me some Senate hearings.
Let's move on to something.
I do like they should replace C-SPAN with these Senate
just
hearings.
Senate hearings.
Make it a lot better.
You know what I would love to do is see. I'm always asking listeners or the YouTube gods to make a supercut of Senate hearings from all action movies and superhero movies. Like, I want to know how long that would be. Like, there's always one in, like, even in Marvel movies, there's always one scene at the end. I feel like
Superman was at a Senate hearing at one point.
Yeah, Superman was. Somebody do that for me, please. I want to watch all the Senate hearings from all spy and action movies. Thank you, Internet. We are at the interrogation scene. So Ethan is captured. He's alive with some Swedish baddies. Did you guys catch the reference
I know where you're going.
to Mission Impossible 3?
Yes.
The rabbit's foot, question mark?
Yes.
On the keychain. A nice nod. We were just talking, Andy and I were just talking about how Chris McQuarrie wanted to layer all the films, and that was obviously a nod for the fans. I think it's really cool because obviously in some of the other franchises, especially in superheroes, they love to do Easter eggs. But that is a lot of times referencing, of course, films from the earlier franchises, but also just comic books as a whole. I think it's cool because Mission Impossible, it started as a TV series, but it is really a movie franchise. And it's fun that they're referencing stuff within the movies. It's not like from the comic books. It's not from some like spin-off TV series. It's like, if you know the movies, that's what it's referencing. I really appreciate it.
I loved it. I thought it was great.
All right. Should we talk about Rebecca Ferguson as Ilsa Faust?
Yeah, we can. But first, the only thing I would say that could make that better, and maybe this would be too on the nose, is if it showed, because I felt like everyone who had a Lucky Rabbit's foot like played with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to see him hold his keys and play with the rabbit's foot, I thought would have been kind of neat too.
It would have been neat,
but it would have been like a lot. Like
it would have been too much. It would have been too on the nose.
Too obvious.
I like that. It was subtle. It was subtle enough to have that. All right, gentlemen, Ilsa Faust. I think she's one of my favorite characters in the franchise.
Oh yeah,
Rebecca Ferguson. At this time, was a well-known actress. She had done a she's Swedish, but she had done a pretty well acclaimed film, but she was not a superstar at this point. Getting her for this franchise is one of the best moves they've ever made because her acting chops, her intensity, and then if you look at the behind the scenes stuff, her commitment to the physicality of the film is unparalleled. And I think her ability to go toe to toe with Ethan Hunt, but more importantly, toe to toe with Tom Cruise as an actor, I think elevates this franchise to another level. I love her so much in everything she does, and she's Lady Jessica in Dune. So I mean, I'm gonna have a pretty big blind spot when it comes to her in her character. I just love her character. Your thoughts? You can disagree with me. I'm totally fine with that.
It's unfortunate because that was going to be one of the points that I brought up at the end. Is that Ilsa was far and away the best female lead in the series to date. Like, I mean, it's not even close.
Not even close.
MI4, MI1, MI2, MI3. Yeah, she did a great job. I really enjoyed it.
Mike has nothing.
You guys have kind of said it all. I mean, she is phenomenal. I think that in the scenes that she is in, I think that she actually kind of steals the movie a little bit. Yeah. And then when you go back to the Tom Cruise scenes and he's alone, you go, oh yeah, he is the star, of course. But honestly, the way that she plays like a double agent is like super neat.
It's so good. It's interesting. I think she would be like an incredible Bond actress. Like she would be incredible in a Bond movie as well. It's crazy that the Broccoli's didn't pick her up for any of the Daniel Craig Bond movies. Can you imagine her being opposite of Daniel Craig?
Are the Broccoli's even still alive?
Well, yeah,
I thought that was a joke when you just said that. I was like, why are we talking about vegetables?
Sorry.
Have you seen the James Bond franchise?
The Broccoli's are the producers of the James Bond movies. They're an Italian family. Barbara Broccoli is currently like the family member that's in charge of it. But I just can't believe that they didn't grab her and be like, hey, you're going to be in 5 movies.
There's a... Yeah, that's a whole thing that James Bonding can get into, but I think it has mostly to do because the actors that play Bond are typically weaker than Tom Cruise playing Ethan Hunt. Right. That if you were to have Rebecca Ferguson play in that movie, they would actually overpower Bond, and I think that would be difficult
too much.
For the movie.
Yeah, you're right. That makes sense, but I think her and Ethan toe to toe, and like you said, Andy, that her as a double agent, like you don't know to trust her, not to trust her is great. Yep. Did you guys notice one of the interesting things? I talked about how Michael Giannaccio did not do the music for this film because he went to do Jurassic World. Very interesting thing that's very controversial.
Yes, I know where you're going.
We don't know. There's been speculation whether this was intentional or not. But
it happens again.
Jurassic World, one of the big criticisms, and we talk about it. If you want to learn more and you want to hear more, go to JurassicPod.com, listen to the Jurassic World episode. Claire running around in her heels is it was a very big internet thing where how does this person run around in heels from a dinosaur? If you noticed, Ilsa as a character takes off her heels when she's running multiple times in the film.
It happens again in Vienna.
When they're all dressed up. It's hard to not say that's a response.
Claire Dearing isn't like a trained agent.
I agree, but it's hard not to, within the context of that happened that year, like 2015, that it wasn't intentional. But it's hard to know with the timeline whether they did it or not.
How would that be intentional? They would not have, like the movies came out in the same year. How would they know?
I know.
It's better for the story and the podcast, Mike.
Yes,
we just go with this.
Go with it.
Don't look too far into it, okay?
But I think it's a nice crossover between the two franchises.
Where's the Sex and the City crossover?
We got to find the Sex and the City.
It's another simple plug for Jurassic Pod. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why you guys don't hammer this one.
Come on. I like how the baddie's nickname is Bone Doctor. I thought of Bonesaw from the original Spider-Man.
I hate that name. I hate
so
it. As
bad.
soon as they said Bone Doctor, I just started laughing. I thought it was stupid.
I don't know why they included that. See, that's where this film edges closer to, if we're looking at a spectrum of the Bourne franchise being super grounded, realistic spy action franchise, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, like those kind of films, and then James Bond. This Mission Impossible is getting closer to the James Bond with names like Bone Doctor. It feels like a henchman. All right, so Hunt gets away with it. Go ahead.
We're skipping the pole climb?
Oh, yeah. Oh, wait, I know why. Because I misread my note. I just wrote in big letters, abs. So, Andy, I don't want to be presumptuous, but I think you probably are the most in shape guy out of the three of us. Like, I know you have good abs. I know you have abs that people could see.
I've seen his abs. They are immaculate.
What do you think about the training? What do you think about the action of what he did? I appreciate it. One, that, yeah, it would be difficult to like uncuff your handcuffs with a key behind your back. Like, I think that is difficult. It's one of the most realistic parts of any movie franchise I've ever seen. Like, they always are able to do it so quickly. But what do you think about the action of actually what he did? Do you think it's possible?
It's definitely possible. I had to look it up because when I watched it, I looked over to my wife and I said, we're all weak. Like, nobody's that strong.
What did she say? She was like, well, I think you can do it.
She respectfully kept to herself because, you know, I'm her husband. Tom Cruise is not attractive in any way, shape, or form.
I feel like Brie could do this.
I feel like both of you, Brie and Andy, you guys could do it.
I feel like you guys could do this.
We need to start the Rouge Nation challenge, and you guys can find something. Just make it happen. I want to see it.
Yeah, but it is done. There's a specific technique. So if you notice, he puts like his shoulder neck area against the pole, and then does like the leg lift part is not actually that much, but he uses the force of his shoulder against the pole.
So what you're saying is it's not the abs so much as it is the traps.
Yeah, a little bit of both, but it's incredible regardless. I can't do it.
I think you know what? Here's what it comes down to. Out of the three of us, you're the closest one to be able to do it. And if you are actually close to being able to do a stunt from a Mission Impossible movie, I think you have to do it.
I think you die happy.
Okay.
I think you have to do it. You're the only one who can get that close to the Cruise levels. So I think you need to start working on it.
When I get back from vacation, day one. We're hitting the medicine ball, doing all the curls.
All right.
You need to design your gym all around. You need to recreate that set just for that sequence.
My wife's always wanted a home gym. I don't think she knew. She just wanted it strictly for ab building and a pole dancing move. So she doesn't know that part yet. She'll know when this podcast comes out.
There you go.
She'll know.
At home gym.
All right. So Ethan gets out. Any other comments about his escape? I think it's fun. I think it's fast. I think it's furious. Not necessarily.
Reoccurring theme. Bad guys can't aim.
That's true. It's
hard. Oh my gosh. I mean, like, of all of the egregious bad guy shooting in all movies,
it felt again, another kind of Bond feeling.
The thing is with this one too, not to like, we need to move on in the movie, but like the baddie had points of reference framing his target and was still unable. Like, let's move on. I'll get so upset.
All right, so then
Keep going.
Ethan escapes. He goes into the phone booth. Really cool nod to the first film. I won't go into the details, but essentially, this is the inverse of the conversation. The way they show this, they show the halfway house, or the person who's receiving the call. They show the inverse of the first film after the opener. When Ethan goes into the phone booth, it's the exact same thing. They just show it differently. So it's a nice nod. I thought since he's in London, he would just go down to the Ministry of Magic and get some support. Why not?
Well, he can't because he needs you. The Ministry of Magic, you have to be in the magical realm in order to get to it.
Well, but isn't that the public entrance? Is a phone booth?
No. Well, yes, but I think he should have transitioned to the toilet. If he had gotten in the toilet,
right?
Flushed the toilet,
that's right.
Then he would have
been, and then he would have had help from the Ministry of Magic. But hey, you have to have tension in a movie. If he got to the Ministry, it would have been too easy. It would have been way too easy. Okay, then we jump 6 months later. I have great editing joke.
I have it written down. Hunley, sorry, at the end says like, this is Hunt's last day as a free man or something dramatic. And then it was like, 6 months later they have not.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's
right. That's why I said great editing joke. That's just, it's just really smart.
Regarding lie detector tests though.
Yes.
So like this is the most unbelievable part of the movie. Okay.
Oh, when Benji gets lie detected?
Yes, because he is literally trained as a field agent to manipulate polygraphs.
I think it's like one of the easiest things you could do.
One of the easiest things. It's like one of the first things they teach you in counterintelligence.
But again, when you think about it from a film goer standpoint, that is used as a device to show the story.
I get that.
To show the story.
But
obviously, this film came out when Google Glasses were a thing because the strike team was wearing Google Glasses, essentially.
Yes.
I thought oh, man. Bring him back. So Benji, he's working a desk job. What do you think of his setup being, corporate guys? I mean, it's a pretty good setup. What do you have, 4 screens?
So I love the setup.
You like it?
I have 3 screens myself. I never deviate from having 3+ screens, except for when I'm on vacation and recording a podcast about Mission Impossible. But Benji was like everyone in the office ever that has been playing solitaire, taking like 15 minutes away from your time.
Or March Madness time.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It reminded me of back in the day, I think maybe it still exists, but like 6 or 7 years ago, when the March Madness online app or NCAA.com, when you could stream it, they had a little button that switched it immediately to a fake spreadsheet, and that's what it reminded me of.
Yes. I remember that.
I knew you would.
Andy,
I knew you would remember that.
As someone who uses 3 screens, can you tell us what your screen setup is? What is on each screen typically?
Yeah. So we're a Teams family, Mike, as you know. That's always on.
I'm sorry for
the
you.
laptop screen.
I'm sorry for your loss.
Laptop screen is
I'm sorry
Teams.
for your loss.
Is that like chat is always open, or like that's where you're meeting?
It's chat.
Okay, so chat.
It's chat. Yep. And then no, it's down below.
Chat. Yeah,
it's like the one that I can't really see.
Whoa. So you have
I have 2, and then 1 in the middle down below.
Think of like an inverted triangle. That's what.
Oh,
yeah.
Like this.
That's what he has.
Yeah.
It's like this.
Yeah,
this is great
Luke
podcasting.
Listener, Luke is showing a tattoo that he has.
This is a triangle.
And it is a triangle. It's a matching tattoo that he has with his wife.
Okay, I see it. I picture it in my mind. Okay, so you have the Teams chat on the bottom.
On the bottom of the triangle.
Okay.
And then the top right-hand and left-hand corners. Typically, Excel is always on the left-hand side. I don't know why it ends up there, but that's where I have all of my working stuff. And that's also where I present. So, like, when you present a screen, I always make sure that it's the left-hand one because in my mind, then I always know, especially if I'm talking in front of a customer, I can control what they see. So always keep one screen as your presentation screen. Right-hand side's usually email.
That's smart. Yeah, one as your master screen. I think Benji is pretty bold because the one thing that I noticed because do you both have cubicles? Because he didn't really have cubicles. He had
we have
hard
an
drive
open
stacks,
office,
but it was pretty open. I thought that was a risky move.
Very open.
But I think that is a subtle way to say he's not really into his work.
No,
he's not loving being back.
He's
out
not
of the field.
He's underutilized for sure.
Which he says.
He says it.
He's
in
like,
yeah,
I've hacked all the code stuff.
So what's in the upper right triangle portion of the tray? Is that email?
Email.
Yeah, typically it's email.
Or Minesweeper.
Dual Excel screens.
Solitaire.
It's
solitaire.
Well, peel back the curtain. I have not always sat next to Mike in the office. So I used to sit on the other side of the wall, and I was kind of secluded. And people, if you were walking by, couldn't see my screens inherently unless you walked behind me. So I had a lot more English way privacy than what I do now. And so now it's all work all the time.
It's you're working. For any YF listeners out there that may or may not be your supervisor, you're always working, and let that be a record show that Andy is always working at all times.
Same as Mike. And also Mike.
I don't know. This movie was, speaking of Teams, was a Windows movie. We have a Windows phone. We see Dell, just interesting. Benji gets a invite to the opera. I think it's really interesting that Benji's an opera fan. Like, I actually think I think it's canon. Like, I think he loves the opera. I think he's a classy guy.
Yeah,
he may play Halo, whatever 16 that was, but
3. It was Halo 3.
He's a classy guy. Actually, interesting fact.
I don't think it was Halo 3.
It was that I read that
would have been ODST or Reach.
Moving on.
What kind of podcast are you trying to do, Luke?
Not a video game podcast. On to Vienna. Gorgeous, gorgeous city. I love this opera scene. I think the opera is a great way to add tension. It's the original entertainment experience. It's ancient. It's part of human culture. And I just think it's so fun. What do you guys think of this sequence? I thought it was very tension focused. I like the intensity and the contrast of the performance, the music, with what was happening in the scaffolding. You had multiple shooters at different angles. I loved it. It was one of my favorites.
Yeah, the whole scene I noted was it was like an opera in that it was rhythmic. You had the music, and you had the music in the background that was crescendoing and flowing in the same way that the scene was. And I thought that was brilliant, directed in a brilliant way.
The line, "If you want drama, go to the opera." Can you guys think of a movie or a TV show where there's been an opera scene and there hasn't been drama?
No, there's always drama.
It's always there.
It's always there.
See, if I want drama, I know that I need to go to CBS because they are drama.
You mean TNT?
Oh, TNT. We are drama.
TNT. We know.
It was almost a great reference.
CBS, that's America's number one to watch network.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Mike.
Yeah,
Come on.
One of my favorite lines of the movie is in this sequence, though, when Benji's walking in up the stairs of the opera house, and he's asking Ethan if he knew that the Australian was this not the monarch, but anyways, doesn't matter. He dies later, but he asked Ethan if he knew he would be there, and he goes, "Oh, it's weird that the leader of the Austrian government's here at the same time that we're trying to catch the leader of the syndicate." Those two things are completely unrelated.
It's so good. I love the Benji chatter. It reminds me of the previous film where him and Ethan are going into the Kremlin and he can't stop chattering. Yeah. It's just a nice callback. And again, we don't realize it at the time as viewers, but we're setting up the relationship between the two. Benji's super excited to work with Ethan. We've shown that he's defending Ethan and that he's really pumped to be on this mission with him. So Benji is kind of spotting for Ethan. He has a really nice Kindle a copy of the Daily Prophet. I don't know which one.
Favorite gadget of the movie.
Yeah, really, really cool. Just swiping right for days.
Another gadget that he had that I thought was neat was the auto lock picker, where he just put it up to the lock.
Right.
And it just
Right. For fans of Elder Scrolls, I've been watching a lot of Oblivion playthroughs because that's where my life is right now. And it reminded me of the lock pick from Elder Scrolls.
If there's more than 5 people that get that reference, I'll be impressed.
Oh, no. There's at least, I get it.
There's definitely a couple I know that are getting that reference. That's what I reminded me of. And then Ilsa comes in. Is it Ilsa? Yeah. Ilsa comes in with the yellow dress. Okay, so I don't know if your wife talked about this at all, Andy, but from my limited experience with fashion, I think pulling off the color yellow for men or women, I think it's agnostic that way. I think pulling off yellow is impressive. And she pulled that off, that yellow dress. I think it was gorgeous. I don't know if your wife had any commentary. I don't know. Did Shannon watch this one?
Shannon did. Yeah.
Any commentary on the yellow dress?
Yeah.
Or yellow as a color? Okay.
Bree didn't say it. She also never wears yellow. So
I just think it's a really powerful color to wear. So again, it's that dynamic of what is she doing? Is she going to shoot the ambassador? I don't know. And then we have this Phantom of the Opera, Ethan in the scaffolding.
I liked the you mentioned the multiple shooters, and hold on, I see your note right now. I want you to go to that one instead.
Okay, so I have a note that says "Man with the Golden Gun." It reminds us again, going back to the James Bond motif, where I don't know what instrument that was. We would have to get our friend Justin on here, who's in the music industry, but it's some sort of woodwind instrument. I think that was correct. And he creates a gun out of it. I think it's really cool, but it reminds me of Man with the Golden Gun.
That guy, he looked like a hot cop.
He did.
He definitely was actually a stripper cop that was just doubling. It was moonlighting.
He probably was a Magic Mike. I loved it.
So this is one of my wife's comments on the movie is that when this Austrian guard shows up, she goes, and this was before he entered in the opera house, she goes, "Oh, Andy, look, it's you. You're on screen." Which is a fun joke that we play.
You know what? I think you could have done it, man. You and never give up. I don't know if this is a dream, but never give up on your dreams. I think you could play a assassin villain with no lines stuntman in a future Mission Impossible movie. Don't give up. Keep working on those abs, and you'll get there.
Got it.
Keep doing the Tom Cruise exercise routine. You'll get there. I love that aspect of her bringing out the sheet music and firing on the note. It's just so subtle and fun. I loved how Benji just got in there. Like in this film, he's not afraid to get his hands dirty. He's been in the field. He's ready to be back. He's got
the experience.
He's got the experience. It's just really smart for him to, one, tackle the guy and then flip the light switch, which I thought that was cool. I felt bad for the AV people that were working the show. What a terrible night for them. It wasn't working, and then they get attacked. It's just a rough day for the AV people. Shout out to my fellow
AV friends out there.
AV friends. My brothers clad in black that are in the shadows working hard on making live theater alive today. I had a lot of empathy for them.
I really liked it was quick, but like Tom Cruise's split second decision about I've got one bullet, I've got like 3 targets technically, and he doesn't pan until the very last second. With the shot. And then also the gun of the flute was kind of cool. It wasn't like a pull trigger. It was like a twist.
Yeah.
It was like, from Bop It, it's a twist.
Twist it, bop it.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Perfect.
Shoot the Australian government person in the arm. God.
Shoot it.
Bop it. Fire it. You know what? That would be incredible.
Kill the Prime Minister of Malaysia.
If we were going to write a spoof action movie, that would definitely be the weapon of choice. Would be a bop it machine that gets turned into a firearm. I think that's amazing. Yeah, I Andy, I totally agree with you. I totally forgot what he was gonna do in the moment. Rewatching it, I was like, I don't know what's gonna happen here. Mm-hmm. And it still shocked me that that was like what he did. I didn't even think about that being as an option.
This is one of those things, like if you remember in the last movie, there were a couple times Ethan wanted to do something and Brant was like vehemently against it.
Right.
This was one of those instances where Ethan's like, the only play is to shoot the guy. Yeah. And Brant's like, no, we're not. He's like, tell me what the play is. Tell me what I need to do.
It reminds me of the last film where it's
you
like,
tell me of a better option.
This is the only option. And that's, as I think about Ethan Hunt as a character, as a spy within the film, that's his greatest gift. And outsiders that are seeing it, like the Senate committee are seeing, and he's blamed as kind of this rogue agent, this guy that's totally loose cannon. But the reason why he's effective is he sees the decision that no one sees, the way out of it that will work, that will cause the
Luther
best.
Says.
Yeah, it's his gift.
Mike's calling forward to a few minutes down the road.
Right.
We'll get to it.
Right. Ilsa says, "Don't wait for me." At one point, that is a reference. It has to be a reference to my favorite movie of all time, which is Jaws. Not, you thought I was going to say Alias.
I can't believe you said Jaws.
Oh, it is Jaws.
Oh, it is Jaws. It's so when Richard Dreyfuss's character is putting on the first barrel line and he yells to Quint, "Don't wait for me." It's so good. Again, running in high heels, she takes the heels off. I think that was very, very cool. And then they jump off the roof. I think that was really fun. That honestly, that felt like I think Temple of Doom that happens. It felt like very Indiana Jonesy, kind of Spielbergy fun running.
First time watching it through, I leaned over to my wife after they landed, and I was like, "Man, I wonder what would have happened if the Austrian leader had been killed." And I'm not kidding you. That's like, it was like 2-3 seconds before the car blows up.
It was good. Again, that shows you that. One, it was the 3 options. One, Ilsa was proving herself then there was a backup to take out Ilsa, and then there was like the car. So Lane had 3 backup options. I mean, that's the ruthlessness of the syndicate, which I appreciate. It shows us again. I don't know if you guys noticed, moving on from Vienna, we have Huntley coming in, taking over. Brandt's like, oh man, we're screwed.
I have so many issues with this Brandt versus Huntley thing.
You don't like it?
Because here's the thing. Brandt keeps like deflecting to the secretary. So why isn't Huntley dealing with the secretary?
The secretary doesn't. The whole bit is there's no appointed secretary. There's no active secretary. So Brandt is saying the only thing I can do is I just kind of adhere to the secretary. But he's cheating the system because there's no active secretary. There's not even an interim secretary, which is why Huntley takes over as secretary. Yeah. So that's the
Did we go past the
in
the car? Okay. Another thing that irritated me is when she goes the lipstick line. This shade is incredibly hard to find. I was like, okay. All right, okay. That's what they use to find you later. Like, duh.
Yeah.
And then he called his shot too. He said how he's funded. That's the key. And so it was another call forward.
So to go back to Huntley, I'm starting to say Huntley. To go back to Huntley, he takes over IMF. IMF is no longer active. But his unit that is taking it over is called Special Activities Division. So we have the Impossible Mission Force, acronym IMF. We have the Special Activities Division, acronym SAD.
That's awesome.
Just thought that was a nice nod by the writers.
I did not get that.
That was a nice nod. We're in the safe house. And then is this where we have a flash drive moment?
Okay, so there's a couple things that happen.
Okay, in the safe house.
Okay.
Which is in a train? No, that was the previous.
That was the previous movie.
This is in a boat. This is in a river boat.
So Ethan and Benji are together alone in the safe house, and Ethan starts to brief Benji on what's going on.
I love this. So buddy cop. I love this.
Not only is it so buddy cop, like I just could not. Andy, I hope that you made a couple notes on this because Ethan is giving a presentation to Benji with a clicker, standing in the back of the room, and just is like, and just like walking through it like he's like leading the regional sales like meeting. And like I literally wrote a note. I'm like, do you think that during like Ethan's like stint off the field, like this was one of the seasons of training that he went to an IMF training?
Definitely.
No, you know what this is from? This is from his cover at the Virginia Department of Transportation for Mission Impossible 3, where he's just like an unbelievable presenter going to conferences. He had all that conference experience. He was just killing it at conferences, at the work conferences. He's just
have you ever
dominating.
One thing I thought was interesting was he stands. His presentation style is to be in the back of the room while the focus is on the content.
Back of the room.
Okay,
yeah, that's a power move. That's a power move.
I have been in like multiple day long trainings where the presenter has presented with that style, where they sat in the back and they had a laser pointer, and they would like when they wanted to point out something on the screen or whatever, then they would flash it from the back.
I call that the high school math teacher style. Or high school social studies teacher style.
Yeah, I was going to say it's more social studies.
Yeah, maybe more social studies. So I just thought that was super interesting that like that's what he picked up from that training was that. And it's so
I think that's just Ethan Hunt.
No, it's not. That's what's interesting is Ethan Hunt is always the center of attention.
Oh.
But when he presents, he is not. He stands in the back of the room and the focus is on the content.
Focuses on the mission. That's what it comes down to.
And the mission is good. Great PowerPoint tip. There were like no words on those slides either.
Yeah, what's the rule?
Nobody had to. Benji didn't have to read anything.
How long did it take him to make those transitions?
Pretty quick. He probably had a sequence. He had a template. He absolutely has a template. There's probably an Ethan Hunt template.
Stock briefing.
Yeah. It's he knows He knows it. What do you think is the storage on that lipstick flash drive?
So,
because it's a very special shade. So it's got to be. I think it's a full terabyte.
No way. It's maybe a gig.
No. Because mine in my backpack is 2 gigabytes.
Oh, yeah, I understand, Luke. It's 2023. Okay. This is supposed to be taking place.
That's a 2015 flash drive. That's not a 20.
Okay, but it's not supposed to be a 2015 flash drive.
It's supposed to be a 2012 flash drive. Yeah. Okay.
So I wrote down that maybe because there's a moment later on. Let's get to the memory part now.
Let's just get to it. Let's just get to what people want. Yeah. They want the memory conversation.
There's a moment later on in the movie where a flash drive comes out, and I wrote USB sizes in 2013, 2015. Okay.
Right.
And I was trying to think of what my USB size in college was. And I rested on, I probably had around an 8 gigabyte flash drive.
Okay.
That was probably what I carried around. If I was even let's be honest, I was using Google Drive. So that was 15 gigs, but they're not carrying around the cloud. Okay. This is Rogue Nation. Everything's on a hard copy.
Hard copy. Right. No cloud.
So 8 gigabytes. All right. I can't remember exactly what the figure was I gave in the last pod, but I'm going to say 1 gigabyte was the size of the flash drive.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from 1 to 8 gigabytes. Yeah. All right. So that is an increase of 7,168 megabytes. Okay. That is by percent, an 87.5% increase in memory capacity.
What's the theory about technology of like it doubles itself? Incrementally?
I don't know. I'll have to go back and I'll have to look at from the first movie.
Is this our last? Do you think prediction? Because I can't remember because I wasn't looking out for flash drives when I watched these movies the first time. Do you think this is our last flash drive in the franchise? I think it is.
No,
I can't state that, but you're referring to Moore's law. I think that
Moore's law
that the number of transistors on a microchip doubles every 2 years.
Right. So Moore's law, I think has applied to the franchise. But my prediction is that there will be no flash drive. There'll be no hard storage. There'll be
Andy,
no memory
how do you know
card.
that?
I have Google.
No. He's this very sophisticated man and very intelligent. That's why he's on the podcast today. Mm-hmm. So the meta thing about this scene is that the CIA claims that Ethan is creating the syndicate to justify the IMF. The meta part of this is that the writers created the syndicate or massaged the syndicate to justify another Mission Impossible. I just absolutely love it.
That is really good.
That's where I know
nice.
Chris McQuarrie primarily, like, he was having fun writing this movie. Like, he didn't, and that's the balance that these movies in this franchise that I've appreciated. It balances perfectly, like having fun with emotion and action and energy and character. Like it just always balances them perfectly, where you're always enjoying the movie, but you're invested in the story and the characters and the outcome. And that's just a small taste of why I love this franchise.
There's a confrontation in this scene between Benji and Ethan that I think is really
it's so good. I had the note. I love Benji sticking up for himself.
Yeah,
humorous and emotional. It's really cool because you get to see Simon Pegg showing his acting chops, his full range of acting chops.
I said, "F yeah, Benji."
Yeah, Benji.
Yeah, I wrote this is very clearly the first time Benji has ever won an argument with Ethan.
Yeah, that's so true. But it sets up the finale of the movie where Benji's captured, and without these moments, the emotion of the ending of the movie doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I love Benji's shirt. Okay.
I don't remember his shirt.
So they jump. Where do they jump?
And then abs again. Was there another abs moment in that? Does Ethan change?
Let's jump to our abs correspondent, Andy Warsen. Andy, how is it over there in Absville?
Well, on vacation, they're not very existent. But
I love Luther's line with Brandt, because essentially what we set up is Brandt and Luther are the other team. McQuarrie talks about how he wanted to separate the teams. We have the two teams separating and coming together. He says, "I know Ethan. I don't know about you." Luther, what a badass. I absolutely love him.
I wanted to see more of Brandt and Luther in the field because their dynamic was hilarious.
I could have done with another scene or two with them. They're so awesome. I love how Benji, I think this goes back to the safe house. He's again excited for masks. Oh no, this is where, so they're, okay. Sorry. So they go to Morocco, and this is where the next mission happens, the water mission. They meet up with Ilsa, and then they talk about doing this mission to get into a server to pull.
Yeah, so where were they before? They were in a safe house in Vienna, right?
Yep.
And they go to Morocco.
Then they go to Morocco.
Okay. How come they never show the travel scenes? Like, where are the scenes of
you want to see like
Ethan getting stuck in passport control or waiting for security, having to dump his liquids, delayed flights, sprinting to connecting flights? Where are these moments?
I don't know. Think about all the banter. So that's the sitcom spinoff that they could have, is just Benji and Ethan traveling to the destinations.
We know that Tom's movies do better when he runs more. Where's the sprinting between gates?
Yes.
Mike, that's a great idea. We should tell the directors to film all that, but then obviously not included in the main film.
Deleted scenes.
But then for the nerds out there like you can listen to it and watch it afterwards, consume it up.
Coming soon to Paramount Plus.
Don't say like you're not like in this.
Rewind it back. I believe your wife called you a nerd while you were watching this
I'm
film.
a total nerd.
Yeah, I love it. Coming soon to Paramount Plus. Mission Possible. Okay. So we're in Morocco. We're preparing for the mission. Benji. So does this qualify Benji getting a mask? Because it's just him imagining it in his mind.
No.
They did him dirty.
Got to use it in the field.
They did him dirty.
Poor guy.
They did him dirty. They're essentially they're planning this mission, which it's a very interesting setup. The behind the scenes helps it and makes it better, I do have to say, because watching the first and then rewatching the behind the scenes, I appreciated it more. They wanted the audience to feel the pressure of having to hold your breath. That was the whole concept. Can we shoot something where instead of traditional water cinematography is you shoot the lead actor for 10 to 15 seconds, then they go up for water, or they have actually like a scuba oxygen tank. Cruise, being the guy that he is, apparently knows or wants to be able to hold his breath for up to 5 minutes so they can actually shoot longer scenes to really build that tension. I did get some expert advice. I reached out to my brother, who actually, as I was watching this film, you're not going to believe this, he was at a free dive class in Mexico, ironically.
The Mission Impossible gods look down on
it was very apropos.
The Navy, man.
I know. So I asked him, because is it 5 minutes? So they have the timers at 5 minutes.
So this is one of my gripes about this scene. I have a number of comments about this.
Okay, go. You go ahead as I pulled this up.
But the timer that they set on the watch was 3 minutes.
Yeah,
and then I timed it. The actual scene took 5.
I counted 450 from
whatever.
From when he hits the water to when he takes a breath. It's 450.
Correct.
So I talked to my brother about this. There's different ways when you're doing like your free diving or holding your breath. And it's very accurate in the movie, where if you put your head underwater, you can hold your breath longer because you're not moving, you're not active. If you're moving, it'll reduce your amount of time to be able to hold water or to hold your breath. And they essentially were like, let's take that concept and make it the plot, where Ethan has to swim around. It's going to be more difficult. My brother said that high-level free divers can hold their breath 7 to 10 minutes. Tom Cruise, the person, they actually show in behind the scenes, he can hold it up to 5 minutes. So it is interesting that like and I think that's one of the hard parts of the movie is in this movie, where it's like, if you understand the behind the scenes, it actually makes you appreciate it more, where it's a little bit more fantastical in the moment.
Right.
I still like it as a sequence.
If they had set the timer for 5 minutes, I think I would have felt better about it.
Because then it would have been the actual time of the movie.
Yes. Mike, I actually need your engineering hat on here. This is a question that I had. I can't make sense of it. The whole premise of the scene, it's a very cool sequence, very cool scene. The whole premise, though, is that there's metal detectors in the flow of the water that automatically shut the water off if it detects metal, which they said then eliminates the requirement for O2 tanks. Is metal the only substance in the world that can hold oxygen?
No, you could use a bladder, but I think the thing here is that in order to hold a lot of oxygen, you need to pressurize it. And metal is, or some sort of aluminum or steel container would be able to withstand high pressures, whereas like a bladder would not.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
It was almost done.
It is interesting. I think the mechanics of the scenario were almost overdid it. They could have done a water sequence that was simpler and more effective. That's my one gripe about it. I just felt like it was almost over-engineered to make it more intense. It did remind me of, do you remember being a kid where you were in a pool and you had like maybe your cousins or your friends and you could run around really fast in a circle and you would create a vortex? That recently. It kind of felt exactly like that. That's what it was. Like I couldn't stop seeing that. It was like, oh, you're just making a swirly wave in your grandparents' pool.
Yeah, this scene also was just a Harry Potter scene dressed as Mission Impossible scene.
It did feel like
grab a golden snitch.
Yes, it did. It definitely did. I really liked the idea that Ilsa saves him. She comes down. It adds the element of like, oh, she's on our side. Then they come out of they get out through one of the sewer systems. Like. Yeah, like that whole thing, how they got in, it was a little clunky for me compared to some of the other missions that they've done. But I understand what they were trying to do. They were trying to create the intensity and tension of that first movie, that in the first sequence in the CIA building, but do it in water and add the element of essentially not being able to hold your breath. I love Benji's line once they come together is, one of these days you're going to take it too far. It's just very intense. Benji really loves Ethan, especially in that moment where he like comes up to him. I would say Benji is the anti-Q from James Bond, where Q is the foil to James Bond. He's angry and frustrated with him at all times. And Benji actually really loves Ethan. He loves working with him. What do you think about the twist where Ilsa kind of screws them over? Did you see that coming?
I don't think so.
I didn't see it coming, but I loved it because that dynamic in the movie is one of my favorite things about Ilsa, where half the time you're like, yes, I'm cheering for you. I want you to do something awesome. And she does it. And then the other half, you're like, I want you to do this. And she just totally swerves and goes the exact opposite direction. You're like, no, but you could have just done this.
And at that point, we don't know why she's doing that, which I think it adds to the mystery. And then we enter one of my favorite sequences of the movie. And maybe we'll have to do a rankings episode of best like action sequences, because this car to bike chase is incredible. Ilsa is on the bike. She has a biker gang. I noticed her biker jacket was like a koi fish. So it's like, I wonder what like the koi biker gang is. Very interesting. The humor in this sequence is so good because Ethan's just been almost resurrected from suffocating, and he obviously has a brain injury, and he's trying to drive. He's like, oh, I'm totally fine. Just so good. And then we have Brant and Luther coming in with a 4x4. The best joke of the movie is, had to get the 4x4.
That's so good. They argue like an old married couple.
They do.
Also, how does this bad guy not hear a 4x4 going barreling down? That's gotta be impossible to not hear that.
Yeah,
it's so good. Jeremy Renner, I think he's subtly underrated as an actor. I think
how is he underrated?
I don't know. I feel maybe because he's Hawkeye and he's just gotten so much shtick for being Hawkeye. This
SNL sketch about Hawkeye is
incredible.
He's
so good.
He brings so much life in humor to movies that I don't think you realize. Are like, oh yeah, he's almost a comedian more than an action star. He's so funny. I love them in this movie. And then we have the chase. Tom Cruise did all the driving in this sequence. They actually did it in Morocco. So this wasn't on a soundstage or anything. They did it live on the streets. And Simon Pegg was in the car with Cruise the whole time. And it was interesting watching the behind the scenes because they were showing this. Anytime you see Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise playing Ethan Hunt driving as a viewer of the movie in the driver's seat. So if you think about it, looking from the car into his face, you're seeing cameras. Those cameras are mounted on the car that he's driving. So he's got 3 huge cameras physically attached to the car while he's driving in the streets, trying to do action sequences. It's so impressive to be able to do that. And he's not just like driving, he's like drifting in the middle of streets. It's so cool. I just love that Simon Pegg was in the car with him, that he trusts him enough. It obviously shows that like Simon Pegg appreciates him. Simon Pegg was also in the plane in the opening sequence. The director was there and Simon Pegg was in the plane to like greet him once he finished. So I think obviously that trust comes through with the characters as well. Just so much fun. And then Tom Cruise gets on a bike and man, great bike.
But he makes
sequence.
sure to grab he makes sure to grab the sunglasses.
Oh, you gotta have them. You gotta have them. You gotta have the sunglasses. This is a beautiful nod to MI2. It's fast. It's so much fun. Cruise looks amazing on a bike.
My knees were sweating. Did you guys have this watching this scene when they would like bend over on the side? Oh yeah, and you're like, if your knee touches the ground, the rug burn would be out of this world terrible.
There's one shot that when he is doing the slide and you see him rub against the pavement and he pulls back. And I love this series and this franchise so much because they kept that in there. And that is not Ethan Hunt. That is not Tom Cruise acting as Ethan Hunt. That is Tom Cruise riding a bike on a road at high speed and his knee touching the ground and him instinctually pulling it up. And they kept that in there. I also thought Rebecca Ferguson also, I don't know how much she didn't do all the bike riding, but she did a lot of it. And I think it showed through. A lot of the stunts and everything she did a lot of the breathing exercises. She was in it to be toe to toe with Tom Cruise. And it shows compared to some of the other franchises where you have a villain or another character that's obviously a stunt person, but she was right there. I appreciate how that chase ended with her just standing in the middle of the road. I thought it was such a brilliant idea to just like cut it short, but also shows her power over him. Mm-hmm. And it's not in a sexual way. It's not in a love relationship way. There is that tension very underlined, but it's more of a spy to spy respect, which I appreciate.
It's one of the main reasons I like her is that there isn't actually like a direct love interest. I mean, I haven't seen the rest of them, but like this is one of the first ones where Tom isn't like into I guess I say Tom, not Tom. Ethan doesn't have a direct love interest.
Yeah, it's so much more focused on their respect as spies and him trying to understand her as a spy, which we learn later in the next scene. Let me get the actor's name up. I just want to give him credit. The most British guy in the movie, Simon McBurney, who plays Adelaide. He actually is in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which is the most British spy movie of all time. One of my favorite books, one of my favorite movies. A great pull to have him be the kind of sneaky British spy. Essentially, they're blackmailing her to do this undercover work, which I think is so good. One of my favorite lines is, "There are no allies in statecraft, only common interest."
It's brilliant.
Ooh, that's a great line, but so true. I have a question for you guys. What if you made this movie from Ilsa's perspective? I think it would be a great movie. It would almost be like James Bond. You could almost make 007, Ilsa as 007 from her perspective. It would be a 007 movie.
If it were a TV series, it could be the spinoff.
Yeah,
for sure. You could have a whole series just on her story arc, leading up to the events of this movie.
Right. I just love her. I just think it would be interesting to see her. They've talked about who the next Bond is. If you had a female Bond, a female 007, if you would make that canon change where it's a code name, it's not necessarily a personal name. I think it would be interesting to have it be this kind of perspective.
The digital safe is called the Red Box, and all I could think of was a Red Box outside of a Meijer where I'd get a DVD to go rent.
Redbox certainly existed at the time this movie came
definitely
out.
was.
Right. In fact, it was the thing at that time was like you had family videos and you had like Redbox, Netflix, and Family Video. The whole reason they were in business is they would get the movies 30 days before Redbox.
Right. That's the thing. Redbox was always delayed with Redbox, which I think they still exist. I think they're outside of a Walgreens. You can find them. I think the Redbox is a nod to, I might be totally wrong on this. There is traditionally for the Monarch, there is a box, and I don't know if it's a red box or green box. There's a box that has all the updates, not the state secrets, but the updates of the Monarch.
If it's not red, that is the dumbest thing ever.
We could go very long on the dumb things that are part of the Monarch, but we're not going to do that today. That is for a different podcast about monarchy that will be starting this fall. Okay, so we go to the auction.
They're prepping. Yeah,
auction.
Well, they're prepping, right? Actual auction itself.
Is there a scene before that?
Not really. Not worth discussing.
Okay, well, let's go to the auction. A very British scene.
So we have Tom Hollander.
Yes. So Tom Hollander, you probably know him from Pride and Prejudice. You know him from the Pirates of the Caribbean. He is playing the Prime Minister. Great get. I love it when these franchises get character actors, really strong performers that work seamlessly in the film. I think Ethan Hunt is referenced at, I think I have the line here is, Ethan Hunt is a gambler, which I think is very interesting. It's a kind of a symbol that goes throughout the movie. I think Hunley says that.
I wrote it down actually later, but it's all, and I think they said it in a line. I forget what movie it was previously, but all he does is go off of a hunch. That's what he does. He just goes off of a hunch and he hopes it wins. And sometimes, all the times, really at the end, he wins. But it's really good. Also, Tom Hollander really outkicked his coverage with the wife. I don't know if you guys saw that duo.
Oh, really? I didn't see. Yeah.
I was like, A does not equal B.
The Prime Minister. Hey, he's doing good.
Hey, man, look, I outkick my coverage too. So
we all do.
We all
just
did.
have to acknowledge the play.
We have to acknowledge it when it happens.
I was getting nervous watching this the first time that we wouldn't have a mask, or like the first mask with Benji wasn't actually going to be the mask. So very grateful.
Yeah, mask scenes are always great because you think there's always a couple moments in each movie where you think like this could be a mask scene, and only about like 30% of the time it ends up being one. So it kind of keeps you on your toes a little bit.
It was a brilliant scene, and I loved watching it a second time, understanding it was coming, and realizing that they were trying to convince Hunley. Like the whole goal of that was to convince Hunley that the syndicate was real.
Right.
And that was great.
It's a really fun way to move the plot along, but also it's so smart. Again, it goes back to that idea that Ethan's like, this is the only way. And he's playing to Hunley as a character that he knows he's motivated by politics. He knows he's motivated by power, and he puts him in a position where he does know what's happening and he could go after Ethan, but he can't not take what's being offered, which is essentially the glory of like solving the mystery and being the hero and getting promotion, which is cool.
There was one line that did make me laugh. Hunley was explaining Ethan Hunt to the Prime Minister, and he goes, "There is no person he cannot become." And then like 2 seconds later, he takes
that
off
was
the
great.
mask.
That's actually your tip off to the fact that like that's a mask scene right there. If you're following along closely, that should be like the Like, we're about to see a mask reveal right here.
It is a really smart mission. I think it's one of the smartest ones they've had in the franchise, where it helps. There's multiple layers of trying to right themselves, especially being fully rogue. It's just, I think it's one of their smartest uses of not like force or being able to hold your breath. It's like a straight up con artist mission, which I really appreciate when they're able to do that in the franchise. It's good to have a balance. Lane does not like to get his hands dirty. I think that's a really interesting characteristic of him. He just doesn't like to get his hands dirty, which as we get to that like gambler motif, Ethan kind of calls him out for it. Like, hey, if you want to deal with this, let's do this in person, which I appreciate. And then I was thinking as we move along the franchise, something I want to be aware of is this feels like a setup for Fallout. Like this is almost could have this been part 1 Fallout in the next film part 2?
I mean, let's not talk too much about Fallout because
Andy hasn't seen it.
Andy hasn't seen it yet.
Fresh take.
But I mean, in some ways, there's some ways, yes, but I feel like you could say that about, because like I don't know, the end of the last movie, they mentioned the Syndicate. So like they had already parsed out exactly what this movie was going to look like.
They had an idea.
Yeah.
They brought in the Syndicate. It was a canon thing. Yeah, they did. It just feels like it just shows that when you have the continuity of a director, that it seamlessly works well because you can pull from the last one. Okay, so we're going to the final sequence where essentially Benji gets captured and Ilsa...
They're sitting at the little restaurant.
Sitting at the little restaurant. And
I gotta say, if we back up, the scroll bar on that account list that Ethan was looking at before they got to the scene, right? Because he had to memorize those. That is a short scroll bar. It is really impressive that dude in like 10 seconds. And I
don't think he did memorize it.
Did he not?
You don't?
I mean, what did he really have to prove?
Maybe that he just knew one. So I guess he could have done that. Then that's less impressive.
Well, that's smart. The gambler idea. Like he went all in and he was counting that his opposition didn't want to get their hands dirty and that they play conservative. Like I'm not a poker player, but I have played poker, if that counts. But he's using his aggressiveness as his tool to get out of that situation.
I mean, when you put your enemy in that kind of position where Lane didn't really feel like he had a choice to really play, like you were saying, like he had to play it conservative, because what if, I mean, the guy that he's matched up against in Ethan Hunt is maybe the kind of guy that would memorize something like that.
Right. He's got to assume that Hunt's going to do whatever it takes. It's really smart. And that whole sequence, I think, it hinges on those three actors. You have Simon Pegg, Rebecca Ferguson, and Tom Cruise, all playing tension and fear without, obviously we get to some more action right after that, but there's no intense action. It's all the characters creating the tension for the audience. It strikes true this whole franchise is we have moments of amazing action, amazing stunts, but we also have fantastic actors creating tension with character and story. And I do appreciate this scene to have this be the climax of this film, where it's the actors, it's the relationship, and it's kind of the buddy cop bromance of Benji and Ethan coming to an end, coming to closure.
I mean, Simon Pegg's he had to act the fact that he was Solomon Lane as Benji is scared. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was actually really good. It's an underrated part of the movie.
So true. They really let Simon Pegg fully showcase his skill set in this movie, which I think is so smart and brings so much.
Which, if you're familiar with Simon Pegg's background, I mean, not that he can't be dramatic. I mean, we see it in the Mission Impossible movie, but it is nice to see him flex that, because he is not a traditionally dramatic.
Yeah, he's known for his comedy, but he actually can do dramatic acting. One of actually, if you like Simon Pegg, I suggest watching the movie Run, Fat Boy, Run. It's a perfect representation of comedy and drama. Essentially, the plot line is he's dating a girl. She breaks up with him because like he's not motivated, he's out of shape, and it's all about him running a marathon and his processing through the relationship, trying to like find himself, find motivation. And it's a very good representation of his range.
To keep the Harry Potter theme going, Simon Pegg is in the new Harry Potter video game playing the headmaster at Hogwarts.
Oh, really?
Yep.
I did not know that.
That was a poll I was not expecting.
Yes.
Wow.
I forget the name of the character. It's a character we all would know being Harry Potter fans, but it's an old headmaster, the last Slytherin headmaster at Hogwarts.
10 points for Gryffindor, Mike. Nice work.
Oh, Snape? He plays Snape?
No, Snape was never headmaster.
Slytherin headmaster? Oh.
Slytherin headmaster.
Oh, I don't know.
I'll look it up,
okay,
and I'll just shout it.
Deep.
I'll just shout it in the middle.
Okay, so essentially what is happening here, Lane has been getting ahead of Ethan the whole time. Ethan is the gambler. He gets him out into the field, and essentially what they do is, like Andy referenced, they trap him. And I was watching the behind the scenes, and they talk about how originally they were going to have Ethan shoot him, kill him. But it just did not feel right tonally. And I think it's really cool that he captured him in the same way, like you said, Andy, as the start, with the box, with the choking gas. And then you have the crew out around him, like watching him.
This is the IMF.
This is the IMF. Da, da, da. A little cheesy, but I love it. At that point, they earned it. It worked. It was so fun.
It was cheesy too, because I don't know if you caught this during with the Benji countdown, but Ethan had 2 glass box references in that speech.
Oh, really?
He said, "That's how I know I'm going to put you in a box." And then a little while later, he said, "I won't be the one locked in a box." And I don't know, a lot of box references.
A lot of box, but it's wow, interesting. I did not catch that.
And then we get locked into a glass. I liked the scene, though, the way that ends. He's banging on the wall. He's shooting at the glass. It's perfect.
It is perfect. And it's a perfect setup for the next film. It's so intense. And I don't know. It's just a really fun way to end this movie that drives emotion, but also is exciting. And it, again, the going rogue part, people like kind of can criticize, but I like how we tear down the IMF and then build them back up. And we set up Hunley as a politician, as the new director. And then we have Ilsa's character saying, "You know where to find me." So everything's still in play at the end of this movie, even more so than the last film. Everything is really still in play. And there's a lot more that can be explored in this universe. All right, gentlemen, before we get to ranking, any final thoughts?
Phineas Nigellus Black.
Okay.
So Simon Pegg plays Phineas Nigellus Black.
Father of Sirius Black?
I think grandfather of Sirius Black.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful that I have that piece of knowledge now.
So happy that
Hogwarts Legacy out now. On all platforms.
On all platforms, wherever you get your games. All right, gentlemen, anything about Rouge Nation before we start our ranking process?
I hope Ilsa comes back. I haven't watched MI6, and that was my one takeaway. She was the 101 of female leads. So if you guys ever do a draft of characters,
she probably would be. She would be the highest one. She would be. Yeah, we'll have to. We are going to do a draft. I think we just have to think it through about how to do it.
Right.
Andy, if you're in, you're one of the first.
It's Jim's territory. That's Jim's territory.
We want to add. We want to get a fourth, so we'll have to add you in. But we have to think through the process.
There's a lot going on. You guys can figure that out.
We'll figure it out. Okay. Mike, any closing thoughts before we get to rankings?
No. I mean, I have my ranking set.
Oh,
I'm ready to move on to rankings. I have no more thoughts on this movie.
Okay, no more thoughts on this movie. Okay, Andy, this is going to give you frame of reference as far as how we rank the movies. Now, we know you're a listener, but for the listeners, if you haven't listened to the show before, we do a 1 out of 5 mask ranking instead of stars. So 5 masks being the best, 1 being the worst. we have allowed half masks.
I was going to say, I just wanted to clarify. There's no 0.25s.
No 0.25s. There's half
0.5s.
masks because in the previous film, there was a half mask made that didn't get complete. So we are counting half masks. Okay, first Mission Impossible. Just Mike and I, we both gave it 4 masks. Second Mission Impossible. Our guest Zach gave it 4 masks. Mike gave it 2.5 masks. I gave it 3 masks. Mission Impossible 3. Both Jim, our guest, and Mike and I all gave Mission Impossible 3 4.5 masks. Mission Impossible 4, our guest Daniel gave it 4.5 masks. I gave it 4.5, or Mike gave it 4.5 masks, and I gave it 4 masks. And now we are on to Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Andy, out of how many masks, out of 5 masks, how do you rank this Mission Impossible?
3.5.
3.5.
Yep.
How would you rank it among like what would the last one have been?
Yep. So I was actually very similar to you guys. I'm probably a little bit more harsh of a critic. But I had MI3 at the top at 4.5. I have MI4 at 4 masks. Then I have here MI5 at 3.5 with the edge over MI1, also at 3.5, and then MI2 down at 2 masks. So
Mike?
A 4. It's a 4 mask.
4 masks. So similar to the first one, the first Mission Impossible.
And I waver between 4 and 4.5, but I'm settling on 4.
I am also going to do 4. And I do that because I agree with Andy. I think this is a 3.5 mask movie overall. But Rebecca Ferguson gives it a full 0.5 boost for me. Because
if there was a 3.75 allowed, that would be my number for the record.
She almost makes it a 4.5. But I'm trying to be careful with my rankings and try to be consistent.
I mean, I'm not putting these on a curve.
I guess it's true. It is hard with rankings. I have a hard time not separating the previous ones.
I understand that.
But in the moment, either way, this franchise is very consistent. It is super consistent. So, gentlemen, thank you for the rankings. Andy, thank you for being on this episode. Thank you for being an avid listener and being a phenomenal guest, bringing the abs, bringing the conversation, bringing the ideas.
Bringing the Dominican.
Sacrificing your vacation to banter about this franchise. Thank you so much, and we really appreciate you on the show. And what are your final thoughts as we move forward into the franchise?
Number one, first and foremost, have to thank my wife. Mike was in the room where we were discussing the time and place for us to record this podcast. And for the listeners, it was supposed to actually be a week ago. And then Mike and I had a work thing that was kind of
You
going
went
on
rogue. You went rogue.
We went rogue.
Disavowed.
And we were trying to find a week that worked. And Mike was like, "Oh, can you do anytime next week?" I'm like, "No, I'm on vacation." And my wife next to me sticks up and goes, "Andy, no, you can record over the week. We're not doing anything." And I was like, "I love you so much. You're the best thing in the world."
She is the Rebecca Ferguson of this podcast. That's all I got to say.
I hope she made it this far in the podcast.
Just have her fast forward to an hour and 40, and then she can get all the credit. Well, thank you for being on the show. Before we self-destruct, Mike, last thoughts as we move into Fallout, which, Andy, I'm not going to spoil anything. Many people say is the best movie in the franchise
ever made. Franchise. Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited. I have not seen Fallout in about a year. I love the movie. I'm excited to rewatch it, talk about it. Yeah.
Here we go. Rogue Nation is complete, and we're on to Fallout.